Ladies and gentlemen, there is a silent revolutionary act that has the power to alter the destiny of your mind. An act so simple, so underestimated, that most people abandon it long before its power ever has a chance to take root. That act is reading, not scrolling, not skimming, reading. Because every time you read, you aren't just absorbing information, you are rewiring your brain for intelligence, resilience, and clarity. In a world built on distraction, reading is an act of rebellion. It is the quiet resistance against conformity, against mediocrity, against the belief that your mind is only as powerful as you were born with. You were not born intelligent. You were designed to become intelligent. And reading is one of the greatest tools ever given to human beings for that transformation. People will tell you that genius is inherited, that greatness is for the lucky few. They're wrong. Your brain reshapes itself every time you challenge it. Neurons fire, new pathways form, memory strengthens, focus sharpens. You are literally constructing a more capable brain every time you turn a page. But reading isn't just about intellect. It is about developing the inner power and moral courage to navigate a world that profits from your confusion. It takes strength to think for yourself, to question what you're told, to form ideas not because they're popular, but because they're true. Reading gives you that strength. It gives you perspective, wisdom, and discernment, all qualities scarce in a world overloaded with noise. There will be days when you feel too busy, too tired, too overwhelmed. But think of this. Every moment you spend feeding your mind with ideas that build you up becomes a moment you don't spend trapped in a cycle of fear, insecurity, and stagnation. Your mind is the battlefield, and reading is one of your greatest weapons. So choose to read, not because someone told you to, but because you know that intelligence is not a gift, it is a discipline. Because you know that greatness is not a destiny, it is a decision. And because deep down, you know that when you develop your mind, you are building the future version of yourself who will stand stronger, think clearer, and live with greater purpose. May every page you open be a reminder you are not done growing, you are not done evolving, you are just beginning. Reading rewires the brain because the act of processing written language, decoding symbols, imagining scenes, and connecting ideas triggers a complex network of neural activity that forces the brain to build and strengthen pathways between different regions. Unlike passive entertainment, reading demands active engagement, which recruits multiple cognitive systems at once: visual processing, language comprehension, memory formation, emotional response, and reasoning. When these systems work together repeatedly, the brain undergoes neuroplastic changes, meaning it physically adapts and reorganizes itself based on experience. This neuroplasticity is one of the most important discoveries in neuroscience because it shows intelligence is not fixed, but shaped by habit, challenge, and learning. Reading provides the exact level of sustained mental effort required to stimulate this growth. When you read, the brain constantly interprets meaning, predicts outcomes, analyzes patterns, and stores information, which strengthens memory circuits and improves the ability to recall facts, details, and concepts later. The more you read, the more these circuits become robust and efficient, much like muscles trained through repeated exercise. Denser, complex reading material, such as literature, philosophy, or scientific writing, intensifies this process by forcing the brain to navigate ambiguity, abstract ideas, and multiple layers of meaning. Over time, this improves not just memory, but also mental endurance and the ability to sustain focus for long periods without distraction. Reading also improves cognitive flexibility because it exposes the brain to new frameworks of thinking, unfamiliar perspectives, and novel information. Cognitive flexibility is the ability to adapt thinking based on context. integrate new knowledge, and shift between different ideas or problem-solving strategies. When reading, the brain is constantly negotiating different viewpoints, evaluating claims, and assessing the emotional or logical implications of the material. Narrative fiction strengthens empathy and emotional intelligence by activating brain areas associated with understanding and simulating the experiences of others, while nonfiction enhances analytical reasoning and the capacity to understand complex systems. This diversity of mental stimulation broadens cognitive range and teaches the brain to recognize patterns, adapt to uncertainty, and make better decisions. Furthermore, reading challenges the working memory system, which is responsible for temporarily holding and manipulating information. Following the thread of a story or argument requires remembering previous sentences, anticipating what comes next, and integrating new data with old knowledge. This mental juggling exercise trains the brain to maintain clarity under cognitive load, an ability that underlies high intelligence and effective problem solving. Intelligence is developed, not inherited, because the brain is not a static container of predetermined ability, but a dynamic organ shaped by experience, practice, and exposure to complex cognitive tasks. Reading is one of the most powerful activities for developing intelligence because it is an intentional exercise that challenges the mind to acquire new information, interpret meaning, and integrate concepts into a coherent internal framework. Unlike innate traits such as eye color or height, intelligence is a result of continual mental development. People who regularly engage in intellectually demanding activities, especially reading, stimulate their cognitive systems in ways that expand their capacity to think critically, reason logically, and solve problems innovatively. When a person reads, they engage in a process of learning that extends far beyond memorization. The brain is forced to analyze, evaluate, and synthesize information, creating new neural structures that support higher order thinking. Over time, these repeated mental challenges build intellectual strength. Much like muscles grow through resistance training, books expose the mind to a wide range of knowledge: scientific, philosophical, historical, literary, and each exposure adds to the foundation of understanding that can be drawn upon in future situations. Individuals who read consistently develop deep reservoirs of knowledge that allow them to make connections more quickly, understand complexity more easily, and adapt to unfamiliar situations with greater agility. Reading also cultivates metacognitive skills, which are the ability to reflect on one's own thinking, evaluate one's assumptions, and adjust strategies for understanding difficult material. These skills are central to intelligence because they allow a person not just to absorb information, but to improve their cognitive processes over time. A person who reads demanding content learns how to confront confusion, navigate ambiguity, and persist through mental difficulty, strengthening both intellectual resilience and curiosity. This approach to learning reinforces the idea that intelligence is a behavior, not a birthright, because it depends on a willingness to challenge oneself and engage with demanding ideas. The role of reading in developing intelligence is also evident in the way it expands vocabulary, improves verbal reasoning, and enhances communication skills. Language is the tool of thought, and a richer language system allows for more precise and sophisticated thinking. As reading enhances linguistic complexity, it simultaneously enhances conceptual complexity, making abstract reasoning more accessible. The mind becomes capable of handling nuanced ideas, identifying logical patterns, and developing coherent arguments. Over time, this iterative growth compounds, demonstrating that intelligence evolves through consistent, deliberate intellectual effort rather than being determined solely by genetic inheritance. Reading builds moral and psychological resilience because it immerses the mind in narratives, ideas, and lived experiences that challenge assumptions, illuminate moral dilemmas, and provide models of courage, compassion, and integrity. When someone engages deeply with a text, they are not just absorbing information, they are entering a dialogue with perspectives that force them to examine what they believe, why they believe it, and how those beliefs stand up to scrutiny. This kind of intellectual and emotional confrontation strengthens a person's inner compass, allowing them to develop a clearer sense of values and purpose. Stories that explore struggle, injustice, redemption, or sacrifice help readers understand the complexities of human nature and cultivate empathy without being overwhelmed by emotion. Nonfiction that analyzes ethics, psychology, and history offers frameworks for interpreting real-world challenges, giving the reader tools to navigate uncertainty with maturity rather than fear. Reading also creates psychological resilience by exposing the mind to adversity in a controlled environment. In literature, characters endure trauma, loss, betrayal, and hardship, and readers witness how these individuals adapt, transform, or resist. Observing these struggles from a distance allows readers to process difficult emotions safely while learning coping strategies and emotional perspectives that can be applied in real life. The mind, when repeatedly exposed to stories of perseverance, begins to internalize the possibility of overcoming its own challenges. Additionally, reading demands sustained attention and patience, teaching the reader to tolerate discomfort, push through confusion, and remain engaged even when material is complex or unsettling. This practice builds mental endurance and emotional self-regulation, both essential for resilience. Reading also enhances clarity because it reinforces the habit of reflective thinking rather than reactive thinking. In a fast-moving world where opinions are often shaped by slogans, algorithms, and emotional manipulation, reading encourages slow cognition, the ability to analyze, evaluate, and interpret before forming conclusions. This intellectual discipline allows a person to identify their own biases, resist impulsive judgments, and make decisions based on evidence and principle. With clarity comes direction, because readers develop a grounded sense of who they are and what matters to them. Books that explore philosophy, personal development, or historical patterns help readers articulate goals, examine purpose, and align actions with long-term values rather than short-term impulses. The confidence to think independently grows from the repeated experience of forming personal interpretations, engaging with complex arguments, and discovering that understanding does not depend on external approval. Someone who reads consistently becomes less vulnerable to manipulation or conformity because they have internal frameworks for judgment. This autonomy is a key marker of psychological resiliency, knowing how to stand alone with conviction when necessary, guided not by fear or pressure, but by a thoughtful and grounded sense of self. Books are powerful in a distracted world because they demand a level of attention, presence, and cognitive continuity that modern digital environments rarely encourage. Digital platforms are built on speed, novelty, and interruption, training the brain to process information in short bursts, to shift rapidly between topics, and to prioritize stimulation over depth. This constant switching creates mental fragmentation, weakening the ability to focus, remember, and sustain effort on complex tasks. Reading functions as an antidote to this because it operates according to a completely different rhythm. A book requires immersion, coherence, and extended engagement with a single stream of thought, which retrains the mind to resist distraction and recover its capacity for sustained attention. By following a narrative or argument across hundreds of pages, the reader practices holding information in working memory, connecting ideas across time, and resisting the impulse for immediate gratification. Digital overload also diminishes the brain's ability to engage deeply with meaning, because it encourages habitual scanning rather than reflective thinking. Most online content is designed to be skimmed quickly, not understood fully, which promotes a shallow cognitive style where the mind constantly searches for highlights without investing effort in comprehension. Books are structured to slow this process down. The reader must parse sentences, interpret nuance, and make sense of context. This deliberate processing activates parts of the brain associated with reasoning, imagination, and emotional intelligence, strengthening neural networks that support complex thought. Reading not only deepens understanding, but also reestablishes a sense of cognitive flow, where the mind becomes absorbed in a sustained task, free from interruption. The overwhelming volume of digital information also contributes to anxiety, restlessness, and a sense of mental overload as the brain struggles to filter and prioritize stimuli. Books provide a stabilizing alternative by offering a controlled environment where information is presented in a coherent sequence rather than competing fragments. This structure allows the mind to engage with ideas without the pressure of constant comparison, reaction, or multitasking. The act of reading becomes a form of mental hygiene, clearing space for clarity and internal organization. It reduces cognitive clutter and restores a sense of internal order, which is often lost in the rapid-fire cycles of notifications, headlines, and social feeds. Furthermore, reading enhances emotional well-being by offering psychological distance from the overstimulation of digital culture. The solitude and quiet of immersion provide a break from the performative pressures of online environments, allowing thought and identity to unfold privately without external judgment. In a world where attention is monetized and distraction is engineered, books reclaim attention as a personal resource, empowering individuals to direct their minds rather than surrender them to algorithms. Greatness requires discipline, not luck, because meaningful achievement is rarely the result of random opportunity and almost always the product of sustained effort, intentional development, and a willingness to engage in practices that sharpen the mind and strengthen character. Reading is one such practice because it demands consistency, patience, and a deliberate commitment to self-improvement. Unlike passive consumption of quick information or entertainment, reading is a slow, sometimes challenging process that forces the individual to confront their own limitations of attention, comprehension, and stamina. The discipline required to sit with a book, especially when it becomes difficult or abstract, mirrors the discipline necessary to excel in any domain of life. Consistent reading trains the mind to delay gratification, a hallmark of self-mastery. Modern culture promotes instant results, instant reward, and instant distraction, but excellence in any meaningful pursuit involves staying focused on tasks whose benefits may not appear until far into the future. Reading reinforces the habit of investing time in unseen, internal growth rather than chasing immediate stimulation. Each page read contributes incrementally to a deeper foundation of knowledge, insight, and emotional maturity, and this accumulation mirrors the compounding effect of daily habits in building long-term success. Individuals who regularly read learn to appreciate progress that is earned slowly rather than given suddenly, and this mindset becomes central to how they approach goals, challenges, and responsibilities. Reading also cultivates the ability to endure discomfort in service of growth. Grappling with unfamiliar vocabulary, complex arguments, or new philosophies often confronts the reader with confusion, uncertainty, or frustration. Yet pushing through those moments strengthens cognitive resilience and reinforces the belief that understanding is reached through effort, not entitlement. This mental endurance is essential to greatness because it prepares the mind to stay engaged with difficult problems rather than retreat when obstacles arise. The willingness to persist, struggle, and adapt is a skill developed through practice, and reading provides a continuous stream of opportunities to exercise it. Beyond cognitive discipline, reading fosters purpose by exposing individuals to the ideas, stories, and values that help them define who they aspire to become. Books offer models of excellence, narratives of perseverance, and frameworks for thinking about leadership, justice, creativity, and meaning. Engaging deeply with these concepts encourages the reader to reflect on their own mission and to align daily actions with larger ideals. This alignment of behavior and intention is core to self-mastery because greatness requires not only ability, but direction. Reading shapes that direction by grounding ambition in knowledge rather than impulse, helping individuals build a life guided by clarity, conviction, and disciplined pursuit rather than luck. Your future self depends on your mental input because who you will be tomorrow is shaped by the thoughts, ideas, and beliefs you expose your mind to today, and reading is one of the most influential forms of mental nourishment available. Every page read carries information, perspective, or insight that is absorbed into the architecture of the mind, influencing how you interpret experiences, respond to challenges, and navigate the world. Humans do not simply react to life, they react according to the internal models they have built over time. And reading expands and refines those models in a way that casual information cannot. Books offer sustained, organized knowledge that reshapes thinking patterns, deepens understanding, and elevates personal standards. The mind is constantly moving toward the inputs it receives, so reading becomes a form of intentional design rather than passive inheritance of the self. Each page read contributes to cognitive development by strengthening memory, broadening vocabulary, enhancing comprehension, and refining reasoning skills. These abilities accumulate and compound over time, influencing academic performance, career opportunities, and interpersonal relationships. People with stronger mental skills are more adaptable, more effective, and more capable of navigating complexity. The benefits of reading often appear indirectly through better decision-making, clear communication, and sharper problem solving rather than through immediate, measurable reward. This delayed effect highlights why reading is an investment in the person you are becoming, not just an activity for entertainment. Every book finished leaves a mark on mental structure, shaping habits of thought that influence long-term behavior. Reading also influences emotional and psychological development by exposing individuals to struggles, successes, cultures, and philosophies outside of their own experience. Each narrative offers a chance to internalize new values, empathize with different perspectives, and question assumptions that may be limiting growth. These emotional insights become internal resources that guide future reactions to adversity, conflict, or uncertainty. When life presents difficult choices, people draw from their mental reserves. Those reserves are built through experiences and knowledge absorbed over time. Books accelerate this inner maturation by delivering concentrated lessons in human nature, ethics, and resilience. The mental input gained through reading shapes identity by influencing beliefs about meaning, purpose, and capability. The stories and ideas a person consumes become internal voices that speak during moments of doubt or opportunity. Individuals who read widely tend to develop a stronger sense of agency because they have encountered countless examples of transformation, creativity, and achievement, reinforcing the belief that they too can grow and adapt. This evolving belief system shapes not only how someone lives, but also who they believe they are capable of becoming. Every page adds something: knowledge, clarity, strength, curiosity that becomes part of the architecture of a future self who is wiser, more confident, and more capable of leading a purposeful life.